When you first open the game, you're presented at the home menu here. One of the first things you'll want to do is to set up a player. So changing to the Players tab gives you another set of menus. The characters that list the type of player or the characters that you have in the game. By default, this will probably just have one blank player named player. You can delete players by selecting them out of the list here first and then choosing the delete player. You can also select the default player so that by default this will be the player added to the games that you enter or the games that you set up. And you can also of course add players. So if you want to add a new player, it'll ask you if you want to make this a default player, and from any of these you can change the name of them. So for instance, player, if you want to change it to Phil Mickelson or Phil M. I'm lazy, I'm not going to type all that. And then it gives you under, again, this is the general tab now. You can see the options that it allows you to select. So do you want to use the brake line indicator on or off? Do you want the grid to be on always off? Do you want it always on? Or do you want that grid to show up only on the greens? So that choice is yours for the player that you've set. The swing meter, whether you want the marks on or off. The swing meter by default, I believe, comes with no marks on it. So there isn't a mark at 50% to help guide you to say this is the 50% power mark. When you put the marks on, there are some marks. They aren't set necessarily at 10, 20, 30, 40, 50%, etc. I believe there are 5 marks that are added, or maybe there's 6 or 7, I can't remember, I don't use them. But nonetheless, you would have to figure out what each of those marks are for, and that's where, again, time spent on the driving range would probably help you determine the distance that those marks allow each club to hit, if you want to practice that, just like the tour pros would, or even the weekend golfers. If you go out to the driving range, you hit a few shots with your 7-iron, for instance, and you learn that, hey, my 7-iron goes 175 yards, or maybe it only goes 150, or whatever the distance is, but you learn that so that when you get on the course you can choose the right club for the right shot. And again, the swing meter marks can help you learn that. Learn those distances and where to hit. Maybe a 3/4 4-iron, let's say, and maybe you know that 3/4 on the 4-iron gets you 175 yards. I don't know. But again, that's where the meter marks could help. The player handedness, right or left. At the current state, there's only right-handed players in the game. At some point there will be left-handed players, but for now, setting this left or right has no bearing, I don't believe, on the gameplay or what you see on the screen. Controller handedness, left or right-handed. I don't use a controller, so I'm not certain of this, but I believe the controllers can be set up as a left or right-handed controller, and you would want to, of course, make this setting match the setting that you're using if you're using a controller. The preferred tees allows you to select the tee that by default your player, this player, Phil Mickelson in this case, would be set at. So would he play typically from the back tees, the member tees, or maybe you want to go from the ladies tee or a championship tee, whatever. Select that option, and if the course has that tee and you don't select otherwise, by default Phil Mickelson would be put from the championship tees as it's set right now. Handicap, again, you just that's your handicap, similar to real life. If you set a handicap of 5, let's say, then it will take 5 strokes off of your score and give you a net score that's 5 strokes less than your gross score. Gross score being the actual number of strokes it's taken you to complete the round, or those number of holes, and the handicap or your net score would be basically 5 strokes less than that. You can also get into a plus handicap, in which case this would actually add 3 strokes to your score. So if you shot, 72, this would add 3, and your actual net score would be 75 for your net handicap score. Most people don't use handicaps, I don't believe, in the game yet, but at some point it might prove to be useful, especially in tournaments, and if they set up different flights and things like that. Again, at the moment there really isn't a huge demand for that, but who knows what may come in the future. The next option is the player type, and that allows you to select either a human player, i.e. if you want to pretend to be Phil Mickelson, you can set this up, and then you're Phil Mickelson, you're controlling how the swings are made. You're not necessarily going to have the same touch and the same skill in the short game as the real Phil Mickelson has, but nonetheless it sometimes is fun to play in that manner. You can also select this to be a computer player, which would be then the computer would automatically play this player for you or against you if you're if you add this player to one of the games you've set up. And if you do set it to computer, then you have the option to adjust the different skills that computer player has. So you, for instance, if it's Phil Mickelson, you might want to put the putting out of 10. Well, he's not the best putter around. He misses some of the short ones, so maybe let's call him a 5 or a 6 or a 7. His short game, though, is generally pretty good, so maybe a 10 or a 9. Driving, well, as we all know, sometimes Phil gets a little wild off the tee, so maybe a 3 or a 4. Long irons, I'm not familiar with his game, but I think his long irons are generally pretty good, and his short irons are generally pretty good as well. Maybe not quite as good as the short game in terms of chipping and pitching, but his short irons, probably the 7, 8, 9 iron or things like that, he's probably pretty good at. So whatever, you can set it to whatever you want, and then he becomes a computer player that you can add to a game to play against as a little added competition. As of now, the computer players sometimes run into some difficulties. They can repeatedly hit into water hazards. They can also have trouble figuring out how to play the shot or where to aim. Sometimes they decide and make the shots relatively quickly. Other times it takes them 30 seconds to make up their minds, and again, sometimes they make questionable decisions. These are all being worked on and hopefully will be sorted out in the near future. So that basically talks about the players and setting up players from human players or computer players. You can set a multitude, you can set additional computer players, as many as you'd like, I suppose. Add another one. You might want to call him, I don't know, Tiger Watson or whatever his name is. And again, you can set him up as computer, and his putting maybe is really good, etc. You can do as many as you'd like, add all these people or players into the games that you play. So that's under the general tab. Under the difficulty now, again, for each player, now these are computer players if you remember, I can't really change too much on the difficulty level of the computer players. although I can, looks like, help them with the snap, help them with the sweet spot by turning these to maximum, for instance. The simplified putting on or off, the wind speed on or off. So a lot of this stuff, I guess, is changeable, but mostly I think it's probably set for the human players, where you would set different, perhaps, levels and different amount of aids for your players that you play with. I think the computer players, even though you can adjust these, they're mostly governed by the skills that you've assigned to that computer player. So the difficulty, I think, is much less critical when it comes to computer players than it is for the human players. The clubs is the next tab. Again, you can select the club set that you're going to carry with you on the course. These clubs will be the only ones you can use during that round. You can mix and match between rounds, but in one round you are not able to change these. You can carry 13 clubs plus the putter. And you can select them, just by picking them in the list here. Now you'll see I can't choose these, and that's because I already have 13 clubs selected. So if I wanted to carry a 64-degree wedge, I'd have to decide which one of these other clubs don't I want to carry in my bag. So maybe I say, look, I don't hit a 3-iron very well. I'm probably not going to hit it anyway. So I will drop that, and then I can carry the 64-degree wedge to help me with my scoring, for instance. Again, just like real players, you can select whatever clubs you want. You don't quite have the same customization in terms of lie angles, loft, etc., but the standard clubs that are in the game, you can choose which ones you carry and which ones you don't. Of course, the defaults button down here returns it all to the default club selection. You can also change the appearance of the clubs. This is the default appearance. It doesn't really make any difference whatsoever. And again, these are for each different player too, so if you want Tiger Watson's clubs to look a little different, you can pick his drivers, and then you can change some of these, I believe. And again, you can see it changes some of the shafts or the grips to a slightly different look. It doesn't really impact, or it doesn't at all impact how they play or how far they hit, how straight they are, etc. It's simply how they look in the game. So just aesthetics, nothing to do with performance and how straight or how far the clubs go. Clothing is much the same, just again, different colors to personalize your character, your avatar. Again, pants, shoes, gloves, hats, pick what you want. The avatar at the moment, there is only one, Hacker Harry. At some point, we'd like to see more. Different skin colors, different hair, perhaps, different, females definitely is something that a lot of players would probably like, especially the women. And but at the moment, there's just one, Hacker Harry. And again, eventually there will be other avatars that we can select. Perhaps we may need to buy them as downloadable content. I'm not sure. Hopefully not, but if they are, of course, people would like to probably have a different avatar to suit their game. In terms of the balls, the Avant ball is the ball that comes by default with the game. For an additional purchase of $1, US dollars that is, you can purchase the Caliber ball, which gives you a slightly better control, if you want to call it that, a little straighter shot, but it will also travel a little less distance, about 10% less distance, for that increased accuracy on that of the ball. So a bit of a trade-off, but again, it's up to the player to decide which ball they want to use if they've purchased the extra ball, or you can just carry on with the event ball with and you know, just learn to play the game at that level, or with that ball. So that's the players tab and all of its sub tabs. Again, you know, it's just there so you can add different players to the game, whether they're computer or human players, and set up various players to play online or play solo games with. I hope that helps.